The price of desire. The cold wind rustled through the thick forest, weaving through the towering trees like a spectral hand. Shadows danced across the moss-covered ground as moonlight filtered through the thick canopy above. The scent of damp earth and ancient wood filled the air, and the whisper of unseen forces murmured in hushed tones, carried by the wind, like an old song, forgotten by time. The forest was alive, not just with creatures, but with history, with magic, with secrets embedded in every root and leaf. The witches had lived here for centuries, bound by their covenants and traditions, guardians of the sacred land. Legends spoke of their ancestors, the first keepers of the forest, who wove enchantments into the roots of the trees and whispered to the wind to protect their home. Their power was not just in their magic, but in their deep connection to the land, a bond that had been passed down through generations. The trees held their stories, the rivers carried their voices, and the very earth pulsed with the energy of their ancient spells. Any who dared to threaten the sanctity of the land would soon learn that the witches did not protect their home with words alone, but with forces far older and stronger than mere mortals could comprehend. They shared the sacred space with creatures that had thrived in harmony, the deer that drank from crystal-clear streams, the owls that sang lullabies in the moonlight, and the foxes that danced through the underbrush. But now, Alexander Sterling, a billionaire driven by an insatiable need to build and conquer, sought to tear it all apart for his latest luxury venture, a golf course that would stretch for miles, cutting through the heart of their home. It wasn't just about profit. For Alexander, success was a game, a relentless pursuit of control over the world around him. He thrived on the challenge, on bending nature and people to his will. Each project was another victory, another testament to his dominance. Yet, beneath his ambition there was an unspoken void, a hunger that no amount of power or wealth had ever satisfied. And so, he moved forward, indifferent to the destruction he left in his wake, determined to shape the world in his image. Trees, some centuries old, would be felled without a second thought. Families who lived on the outskirts of the woods would be displaced, forced to watch their ancestral lands turn into yet another monument to wealth and excess. The ecosystem would be shattered, rivers polluted, and the balance of life irreparably disrupted. The coven knew they had to act. They had to protect their home, not just for themselves, but for all those who depended on the land's magic and sanctuary. And so, the witches gathered, preparing to make Alexander Sterling understand loss in a way he never had before. Celine, the eldest of the coven, had pleaded with him countless times. "Turn back, Alexander Sterling. This land is not yours to claim. It is sacred, a sanctuary for both magic and life." Alexander smirked, his piercing gray eyes brimming with arrogance. "Everything has a price, even your precious trees and traditions. Name it, and I'll make you richer than you ever thought possible." Celine's emerald eyes darkened, her patience finally wearing thin. "You will know loss, Alexander Sterling. You will know the pain of having something precious stripped away, just as you have done to this land and those who depend on it." Raising her hands to the sky, she called upon the power of the ancients, her voice reverberating through the air, causing the very ground beneath them to tremble. "The moment your eyes meet with your soulmate, you shall die." Alexander scoffed, letting out a dismissive chuckle. "Superstitious nonsense. If such a thing as a soulmate exists, I hardly believe in fate or magic." Celine merely stood still, her face unreadable as she watched him turn away. A shadow of sorrow flickered in her emerald eyes, though she did not let it linger. She had seen this path before, had watched the arrogance of men lead them to their own undoing. The threads of fate had already woven his destiny, and she knew, no matter how much he scoffed at her words, his time would come. The air around her pulsed with unseen energy, whispering of what was to be. She closed her eyes for a brief moment, exhaling as though she could already hear the echoes of his final breath. She knew the moment would come when he would understand the weight of her words, but by then, it would be far too late. A year passed, though it had not been an easy one. The construction of the golf course had been plagued with setbacks from the start. Machinery inexplicably malfunctioned, drills broke upon touching the earth, and workers reported strange occurrences, whispers in the wind, eerie figures lurking between the trees, and tools disappearing overnight. Some left in fear, convinced the land was cursed, while others dismissed it as mere superstition. "Boss, we lost another excavator today," the site manager, Peter, informed Alexander with a frown. "It just stopped working, like the others. No explanation." "Then get another one," Alexander replied impatiently, flipping through documents without looking up. "We're on a deadline. I don't have time for ghost stories." But as the days passed, the problems escalated. "2 men quit today," Peter said one morning. "Said they saw something watching them from the trees. And last night someone swore they heard voices whispering their name." "Tell them to grow a spine or I'll find someone who will," Alexander snapped. "I don't believe in curses." The land, however, seemed to fight him at every turn. Storms appeared without warning, drenching the workers and turning the ground into an impassable mire. Trees felled during the day seemed to groan in protest, their branches tangling in the machines as if clawing to hold their place. At night, eerie whispers carried through the camp, voices murmuring just beyond the edge of the light, always too faint to fully discern but chilling enough to send even the most skeptical men fleeing. Equipment failed without cause, blueprints were inexplicably altered, and every attempt to push forward felt like trudging through unseen hands determined to stop them. It was as if the land itself was rejecting his intrusion, pushing back with an ancient force beyond his understanding. When a massive storm rolled in out of nowhere, flooding the newly laid fairway, Alexander finally allowed himself a moment of hesitation. Had the witch truly done something? No. He shook the thought away. Superstition had no place in business. He would finish the course no matter what. Alexander, however, never lingered on the thought of the witch or her words for long. He chalked it all up to incompetence and misfortune, pouring more money into the project to ensure its completion. Trees were raised, the land was flattened, and luxurious greens replaced what was once an untamed haven for wildlife. Yet, even as he stood on the grand opening day, surveying his latest achievement, he felt a strange emptiness, an unease that he could not shake. Despite the triumph, he found himself restless. There was no satisfaction, no pride in what he had accomplished. He had poured money and determination into completing the golf course, as if proving the witch wrong would erase the uneasy feeling clawing at his insides. Yet, even as the grand opening was celebrated, he felt nothing but an insatiable hunger, a gnawing emptiness that nothing could fill. He had everything, wealth, power, control, yet none of it made him feel whole. Each business deal, each successful venture, each new indulgence left him with nothing but a hollow echo of fleeting gratification. He tried to drown it out with excess, with luxury, with meaningless encounters, but the hunger remained, growing stronger with each passing day. "Why do I feel like this?" he muttered to himself one evening, standing alone in his penthouse, gazing out at the city skyline. The lights blinked below, a testament to his empire, yet he felt like he was staring into a void. Sleep eluded him. Food tasted like ash. The laughter of others grated on his nerves. He was a man who had conquered the world, yet he could not conquer this yearning, this strange and terrible sense that something essential was missing. Something real. He had spent weeks feeling lost, drowning in a sea of meaningless victories and empty indulgences. The world around him, once so easily conquered, had become a blur of monotony. Every achievement, every dollar added to his fortune, felt like another layer of insulation against the gnawing emptiness inside him. Then everything changed. The monotony of his existence, the hollowness of his victories, all of it came crashing down in an instant. He had spent so long building his empire, believing power and wealth could fill the void inside him. Yet, none of it had. And just when he had begun to accept that he would never feel anything real, she appeared, a force unlike any he had ever encountered. His mind, once consumed by deals and dominance, now fixated on something entirely different. He had no control over it, no strategy to conquer it. He had spent his life acquiring everything he ever wanted. But for the first time, he realized he had never truly known what he needed. He met her. Eleanor Hart. She was unlike the others. Eleanor Hart was a woman of rare intellect, a fierce and independent spirit who carried herself with an air of quiet confidence. Her deep brown eyes held an intensity that could unravel even the most carefully guarded of men, and her voice carried the weight of someone who knew her worth and refused to be diminished by anyone, least of all, a billionaire like Alexander Sterling. She was not only beautiful but captivating, with a natural grace that commanded attention without demanding it. Her sharp wit and unwavering morals set her apart in a room filled with artificial smiles and hollow flattery. She had built her own empire, not in wealth but in influence, using her mind and determination to drive change in the world. They met at a charity gala, where he had expected her to fawn over him like everyone else. Instead, she barely acknowledged his presence, her focus dedicated to the cause at hand, rather than the elite guests vying for her attention. "Mr. Sterling," she greeted coolly, her gaze meeting his, with neither awe nor interest. "I don't care for your money or your charm. If you're looking for another conquest, look elsewhere." For the first time, Alexander felt desperate. He pursued her relentlessly, not out of conquest, but out of an unshakable need to be close to her. Each rejection was a mirror reflecting the hollowness he had tried so hard to ignore. Eleanor was the first woman to challenge him, to see through his facade and not be swayed by his wealth or reputation. She treated him like a man, not an untouchable tycoon, and it unsettled him in a way that made him crave more. Months passed, and slowly, she began to soften toward him. It wasn't easy. He had to prove that he was more than just a ruthless businessman. He listened more, spoke less, and found himself thinking about things he never had before. How to be better, how to make a difference. The hunger inside him changed, shifting from an insatiable need for more power to an aching desire to be worthy of her. For the first time in his life, Alexander Sterling wanted something money couldn't buy. Eleanor was his salvation, the missing piece he had never realized he needed. He found joy in the simplest moments with her. The way she laughed, the way she challenged him with sharp wit and unwavering conviction. His world, once built on dominance and wealth, now revolved around something more fragile and precious. Finally, she agreed to a date. It was more than just an evening together. It was his chance to show her that he had changed, that he could be the man she deserved. And for the first time in years, Alexander Sterling felt something close to hope. Alexander was elated. He had never felt this alive. But fate had other plans. A creeping sense of dread slithered into his mind, one he couldn't shake, no matter how much he tried. The night air felt heavier, pressing down on him like an invisible force. On his way to pick her up, Alexander felt an unusual sense of triumph, a rare crack in his normally controlled demeanor. He had spent months reshaping himself, proving that he was more than just a ruthless businessman. He had won Eleanor's trust, her attention, something far more valuable than any empire he had built. The thought sent a surge of exhilaration through him, and for the first time in years, he allowed himself to believe that happiness was within his grasp. Yet, beneath the triumph, there was something else. A quiet, nagging fear. What if he wasn't truly worthy of her? What if this was all just an illusion, and she would see through him, just as she had in the beginning? He gripped the steering wheel tighter, pushing the doubts aside. No, he had changed. He had fought for her, for himself. Tonight would be the first step toward something real, something lasting. For once, his mind wasn't occupied with business deals or power struggles. It was focused solely on her. But as he drove, an eerie stillness settled around him. the night air thick with something he couldn't quite name. The streetlights flickered as he passed, casting fleeting shadows across the empty road. Then a sudden gust of wind rattled the car, sending a shiver down his spine. He dismissed the unease, gripping the wheel tighter. He had worked too hard, changed too much, to let irrational fears take root now. Then, without warning, the tires lost traction. The world spun as his body was thrown forward, metal screeching against metal as glass shattered around him. Pain surged through his limbs, but nothing hurt more than the horrifying realization. This was it. The witch's words echoed in his mind as his vision blurred. The last thing he saw was a flash of light before everything faded to darkness. The first sign was the sharp, sudden chill that spread through the air, sending an involuntary shiver down his spine. Then, in an instant, the world turned to chaos. His car hit an unexpected patch of ice, the tires losing traction, sending him into a helpless spiral. His hands gripped the wheel, but there was no saving it. The luxury vehicle spun wildly before smashing into a thick tree trunk. The impact was brutal. Metal screeched and crunched as glass shattered around him, embedding sharp fragments into his skin. The scent of burning rubber and gasoline filled the air, mixing with the coppery tang of blood. Pain flared across his body, sharp and unrelenting, but it was nothing compared to the terrifying realization creeping into his mind. He had finally gotten what he wanted, a chance to be with Eleanor, and in the cruelest twist of fate, he would never get to see it through. As his vision blurred, his breaths becoming ragged, a shadow appeared beside him. Celine. Her voice was soft, filled with the weight of inevitability. The moment your eyes meet with your soulmate, you shall die. And now you finally understand. Alexander Sterling. And in that moment, Alexander understood. It had never been about punishment. It had been about teaching him loss, about making him understand the pain of wanting something he could never have. His mind reached for Eleanor, for the warmth of what could have been, but it was too late. As his breath faltered, his last thought was of her, his soulmate, the one he would never hold. And then, there was only darkness,